I'm Bill Tyra. I live in Trumbull, Connecticut. Currently a pilot for American Airlines. But about 10 years ago, I was in the Marine Corps. I was a colonel in the Marine Corps. I was in my 25th year of service. I was having a very good career. I've been married for over 20 years to the former Barbara Provenzano from Norwalk, Connecticut. I have two wonderful children, Katie, 16, and Ashley, 13. Personal tragedies like bad automobile accidents, deaths to the family unexpected, and injuring from medical malpractice were things that happened to other people, not us. However, on 8 April 1998, Katie, my oldest daughter, was fatally injured through medical malpractice and a cover-up that was committed by at least 3 other board-certified physicians. Personal tragedy was no longer anything that happened to someone else. It happened to us. My daughter was scheduled to undergo what was supposed to be routine surgery at Walter Reed Hospital. She was going to have a benign growth that was going to be removed from her neck. At about 11:40 in the morning, we kissed her goodbye and they wheeled her into surgery. And about 20 minutes later, she suffered cardiac arrest. She went into cardiac arrest and went into a coma and died 12 days later. After she died, we asked a lot of questions, as you would expect most families and parents would. What we were told was that she had suffered some type of allergic reaction to an antibiotic. We weren't pointing fingers from the onset of what happened. I didn't particularly blame anyone, because the way my business was as a pilot was any time you have an accident or unexpected event, you have to collect the information, facts, and details. You don't make accusations or point fingers. You need to find out, collect the information, and find out what happened. What also caused us some concern was the thoracic surgeon that oversaw her final treatment for the last 10 or so days. He had a hard time believing that she suffered an allergic reaction to an antibiotic. He believed that a mistake had been made over Walter Reed Hospital and that the person that made the mistake may not even know about it. They may know about it, but in all likelihood they don't. But he had never seen anything like that. I then asked for an investigation, as any responsible parent would, as to my daughter's treatment. Pointing no fingers, just wanted an investigation and a briefing. About a month after she died, I went and I received the briefing. And we were told again that she may have suffered some type of allergic reaction to an antibiotic. But the more questions I asked, the more vague became the answers. The more I looked through her record, which I had already looked at quite a bit, and began to ask questions, the more difficult it seemed for them to come up with answers. Ultimately, it came down to was no one really understood how a 16-year-old, within 20 minutes, collapsed and never recovered. I commented, I guess things like this happen very often at the hospital, so that's why the investigation appears not to be as thorough as I wanted. And they assured me, no, these things don't happen. 16-year-olds don't die in hospitals that often, and that they took it very serious. Well, based on what I was being told, that's not what I was seeing. So I insisted that they were not done until they had completed an investigation, provided an answer that was satisfactory to me and to my family. And that was lacking. Over the next several months, we had many phone conversations. I also met with the Walter Reed staff. I talked to several of the physicians that were responsible for supervising her treatment. But what came out of these conversations was that, and by my review of her records, which I became very good at learning how to read medical records, something I wish I never had to do, but as a responsible parent, I felt an obligation to get to answers I was not finding, was not hearing. I found several contradictions in her records, and there were also entries in there that were deleted or just plain missing. So ultimately I determined that the only way to find out what really happened to Katie was to bring in the anesthesiologist that was treating her at the time of the collapse. And for some reason, that I did not know. He had never been included in any of the phone conversations or briefings. Initially, the hospital balked because it was very unusual for them to have the physician come back to the family to go over the case. But all I insisted was he was the treating physician, and there were clearly contradictions in the records, and they couldn't deny that, so they finally agreed to ask him to come up and meet with me. When he was called, this was right before Thanksgiving 1998, he was called and he was invited to attend a meeting with me to go over the 30-minute period in which Katie was entrusted to his care and collapsed. He confessed within a few hours of that, of killing her, of lying about her treatment to the team that tried to resuscitate her, and he admitted to falsifying the medical records. Ultimately, Dr. Hamner was prosecuted for involuntary manslaughter, and he was convicted in federal court for 6 felonies. Several of his supervisors were also disciplined for improperly preparing medical records, and according to the convictions, willfully altering her medical records. Most physicians or healthcare professionals are honest. I've got to believe that, and I want to believe that. But as I learned, and as many other victims of medical malpractice learned, there are rogue physicians, healthcare professionals out there. There are dishonest physicians, and there are incompetent physicians or healthcare professionals, whatever you want to call them. Why are they out there? It's because largely their peers do not want to discipline them, and their state medical examiner boards often fail to do their job. In my particular case, Dr. Hamner was convicted for 6 felonies against a minor, my daughter, in the operating room. He is still practicing medicine and never had his license revoked. He was disciplined, he paid a small fine, but continued in the operating room.